All right, so welcome to Living Your Best with advanced metastatic, chronic, and non-curable cancer. Today's topic is cancer-related insomnia with Catherine and Pidolo. My name is Nikki, and I'm so pleased that you could join us for tonight's speaker session. I do want to start with our land acknowledgement. Our health and well-being are connected to the land and to the environment that surrounds us. We acknowledge that the land we share, learn, and live on are the traditional territories in Alberta of Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8. This is also the home of the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation within Alberta. Here at Wellspring, we are both settler and Indigenous, and we pay tribute to those whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Wellspring acknowledges the traditional healing pathways and the knowledge of our interconnectedness with the land as gifts provided by elders and knowledge keepers. Living Your Best is a collaboration with Cancer Care Alberta and Wellspring Alberta. And just a little bit about our speaker tonight. So Catherine Ann is a Doctor of Philosophy, aka PhD student under the supervision of Dr. Sheila Garland. She has worked with a psychosocial team here in Alberta, and her dissertation focuses on examining the feasibility and acceptability of the I Can Sleep app, which I'm sure we'll hear more about, and which is designed to address insomnia in cancer survivors. So please join me in welcoming Catherine Ann. And Catherine, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm just going to take a moment to make sure I get my screen and slides all prepared for you. Okay. So as Nikki mentioned, my name is Catherine Ann. I'm actually a Doctor of Psychology student, which is a PsyD student, similar to a PhD, but not quite. So just to clarify, it's a Doctor of Psychology student at Memorial University. And I am under the supervision of Dr. Sheila Garland here in Newfoundland. So these slides have kind of been adapted from her presentation. I believe that she's maybe done in the past, maybe for Wellsprings or elsewhere as well. And I'm really excited to be here today. As Nikki mentioned, Wellsprings is close to home because I grew up in Calgary or went to school in Calgary and spent some time in the psychosocial oncology department. So really excited to be here today and to be talking to you guys about sleep. So just a quick little overview. We'll go into some things about sleep in terms of our states and our stages, and we'll look at sleep across the lifespan and what sort of things are regulating our sleep. We'll also look at when sleep goes wrong. So when sleep isn't going that great and where we get into that area of maybe defining it into insomnia symptoms or insomnia disorder. And we'll look at specifically insomnia and cancer and some treatment recommendations. And I included a lot of like tips and tricks or better sleep rules just to kind of give you something tangible to maybe even try tonight or moving forward the rest of this week to help with those sleep difficulties you may be experiencing. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So first, we'll kind of talk about what is our sleep and what do the sleep states look like. So we actually have two sleep states. So we have our non-REM and our REM sleep. So our non-REM sleep is made up into three stages. So if we look kind of on the right-hand side here, these are what our sleep waves will look like. So if we start with our relaxed or wakefulness stage, they're really close together and really small. These are our alpha waves, okay? So in our non-REM sleep, we have our stage one. So this is our first one. So this is our light sleep. And during this light sleep, it's kind of our low arousal threshold, meaning it probably won't take much for us to kind of wake up at that point. So you can see here, though we are asleep and we start to see these theta waves. You know, they're a little bit bigger and they're a little bit more spread out than what we see in these alpha waves. Okay. So it's also, we refer sometimes as the sleep state misperception, meaning sometimes we're in this state and we think we're not really sleeping. We may be in that in and out stage, or we may just think we're dozing, whereas others around us are being like, no, you definitely fell asleep there, right? So this is our stage one. And sometimes it's marked by having like a jerk kind of body reaction or a head nod where you kind of wake yourself up from it. That's when we know we've been in our stage one sleep. Now moving on to stage two, still in the non-REM sleep. This is more of a deeper sleep and has a little bit higher threshold for that arousal system, meaning it's going to take a little bit more to wake us up from it. So our stage two, we have our sleep spindles and our K complex. So we actually spend majority of our night, if not 50% of our night, in this stage. And it really serves as that transition phase from going from a lighter sleep into maybe a deeper sleep, which leads us to stage three. So stage three, it used to be separated into stage 3 and 4, and it's been since combined, largely because it was getting hard to differentiate between stage 3 and 4. So they just made it under one. So this is what we call the slow wave sleep, and this is our deepest sleep. So we see our delta waves here. They're a lot bigger and they're a lot spread out, especially in relation to that wakefulness. They look very different. So really big and spread out. This stage of sleep is actually when our brain is the least active, but our body is doing the most. So this stage, our sleep is responsible for kind of that physical repair and restoration. And now moving into the REM sleep, or the rapid eye movement sleep. This is a stage of sleep that is more closely related actually to our wakefulness. So if you look at the waves here, they look quite similar. They're different, but still kind of close together, especially in comparison to those delta waves. So this REM sleep, is close to that wakefulness state, but it really is where, sometimes those dreams kind of come into play is during our REM sleep. And what happens because we are dreaming, our body actually has a mechanism that turns off our major muscle groups. So we're not acting out our dreams, which is a protective factor for us and those around us. But during that state, we may be dreaming, but our muscles are kind of paralyzed, so we're not acting those out. The REM stage also provides a couple of other functions, such as memory consolidation and emotional regulation. So again, these are kind of our states and stages of our sleep. We also have something called our sleep architecture. So this is how we cycle through our sleep stages throughout the night. So if we look at this here, we can see our stages on the side. Now, if you can try to remember, 3 and 4 are now consolidated into that one stage 3 sleep. Then we have our stage 2 and our stage 1. Then we have our REM sleep, which are identified by these gray lines here. And then on the top, we have our peaks of wakefulness. And then down below are hours of sleep, okay? So if we were to actually separate our night of sleep into maybe the first part of the night into the second part of the night, they look a little bit different. So in the first part of the night, we're seeing that we get a lot more of that deeper sleep. So that's our stage 3, essentially. Those are our delta waves. So our first part of the night is when we're in our deepest part of sleep, which is what's responsible for that physical repair and the restoration that the body needs. So even on those nights where you're not getting that full night of sleep that you may want or that you're looking for, we're still getting that benefit from the first bit of sleep of that physical restoration and repair. Now, looking at our REM sleep, we see that we actually aren't getting a lot of that in our first part of the night, but we're getting it a lot closer to the end or the second half of our evening or our sleep. Now, like I said, in the slide before, our REM sleep and our wakefulness waves look very similar. This is actually a good thing because what we want is it's easier for our body and our brain to wake up from going from a light sleep into a REM sleep into a wakefulness state. It's not that big of a difference because the waves look so similar. So if we're waking up during a REM sleep, that's when we're able to kind of recall those memories sometimes early in the morning, and it's easier for our body to transition from the REM to the wakefulness. Now, on the flip side of that, let's say you were in a deeper sleep. So you have those delta waves. So they're very big and very different than our alpha waves here. If you were to wake up in the middle of one of these, that's when you wake up kind of feeling groggy or sluggish or feeling like, oh, I didn't even rest at all. And that's because it's really hard for our bodies to transition from that deeper sleep to that wakefulness. And the reason that I point this out is because that's largely why when we come to our recommendations around napping, we have that time set. So in that first part of the hour here, you see that we enter into that deep state, kind of close to past that 45 minutes into those 60 minutes. So what ends up happening is if we're napping for around that hour mark, and we are not in that REM sleep and we're in that deep state of sleep, we sometimes waking up feeling worse off than when we first wanted to have that nap. And that's because we're feeling really groggy and we're trying to wake up during that deep state of sleep, which is why, when we do recommend napping or when we suggest napping, try to keep it under that 45 minutes. So you may be wondering, if deep sleep is what we all need, why can't we be in it all the time? Well, the advantage of having the different stages in our sleep cycle is largely to kind of protect us for listening to other things we need to respond to, such as external stimuli or internal stimuli. So that could be a baby crying, the fire alarm going off. It's really a protective mechanism that we can wake up from our sleep when we need to. Or if you need to get up and use the washroom, when we're in those lighter stages, we kind of can wake up from that and go use the washroom when we need to. Okay. And then now looking at, sleep across the lifespan, we can see here, there's our delta waves or stage 3. Again, this is for our physical repair and restoration. These start off really high, or there's a lot more of it when we're younger. So those are little kiddos who are in growth spurts, they're growing, they're really easy to repair from injury. And as we start to age, it may take us a little bit longer to start to recover from things. Then we also see that our REM sleep too stays a bit consistent as we get into our adulthood. There's not too big of a change here. But we do see some changes in our light sleep. So we're having a little bit more. But we also are spending a lot more time in bed than we used to than when we were kids. So as we age, we're spending more time in bed, even though we're not necessarily sleeping. Now, as we age too, the amount of sleep that we need changes as well. So you can see, this kind of goes all the way from newborn up to 65 and plus. So we need a lot more sleep when we're younger. And as we get into adulthood, it doesn't actually change too much. So we have, in our younger adults recommended or around 7 to 9, 7 to 9 again. And then as we get to 65 plus, it's more in that 7 to 8. Now, where we start to see maybe some more sleep difficulties or challenges is when individuals are sleeping outside of the teal here. So maybe if they're only getting 4 hours, then that's something we probably need to be looking at, right? Okay, so what regulates our sleep? There's actually 2 processes that work and regulates our sleep, and that we can actually use to our advantage once we start to understand them a bit better. So the first one is our sleep drive. So our sleep drive will naturally increase throughout the day. So the more time that elapses, the more tired we're going to feel. And this is largely kind of driven by adenosine, which is a neuromodulator in the body that accumulates as we're awake. So the longer we're awake, the more that adenosine will accumulate and the more tired we're going to feel. Now, interestingly enough, caffeine molecules is what binds to these adenosine neuromodulators. So it kind of tricks our body into feeling like, oh, we're not that tired. We're feeling good. We're going to keep going. And then once that caffeine kind of wears off, we start feeling that sudden crash or that whoosh of tiredness. And that's that adenosine kind of being activated now because those caffeine molecules are no longer binding to it. So this adenosine that accumulates in our brain diminishes as we sleep, which means our sleep drive or our sleep pressure starts to decrease as we sleep. So this can be really comparable to another homeostatic system, such as hunger. So if you think about it, the longer you go without eating, the more hungry you're going to feel. And same thing with sleep, the longer you go without sleep, the more tired you're going to feel. Now, if you were to have a snack before a big Thanksgiving dinner, you're probably not going to be as hungry come your dinner. And same thing with sleeping. If you have a nap right before or later on in the evening, you're going to decrease your sleep drive, and then you're not going to be as tired as when it comes time for you to go to bed that night. So if you want to take out a piece of paper, we can do the math together or independently, and I'll kind of walk us through an example. So like I said, we can really use the sleep drive or the sleep pressure to our advantage. So we can try doing the math. So what you want to do is take a look at is what you're typically sleeping right now. So not the amount of time that you wish to be sleeping, but what you're typically sleeping right now. So for myself, I put in roughly 6 hours. So I'm sleeping roughly 6 hours right now. Then at the time that I decide to wake will be 7 a.m. So I'm going to put that down next. Now, what you're going to do is subtract your sleep duration from your wake time. So 7 minus 6 is 1. So that's going to be my time to bed is 1 a.m. Okay. So what that means is from 1 a.m. to 7 a.m., I'm going to be sleeping for about 6 hours. Now, if we were to subtract that from a 24-hour clock or 24 hours in the day, that means I'm awake for a total of 18 hours. So the total of 18 hours is how long is needed for me to, or for my sleep pressure and sleep drive to be at its max. Okay, so if you guys want to take a second to maybe try doing that. No pressure though either way, but I'll just take a few moments if you want to. So what this number is telling us is that we need to be awake for about 18 hours for my sleep drive, so that feeling of sleepiness from the adenosine to build up in order for me to fall asleep. So this is the math that you can use to help kind of figure out what time it is you should be going to bed based on what time you want to wake up in the morning. So there's also some things that can, weaken our sleep drive. So this is spending excess time in bed or napping. So again, back to that, if you attribute napping to snacking. So if you snack right before dinner, you're not going to be as hungry before your dinner. Even if you're snacking throughout the day, you're probably not going to be hungry when it comes time for a meal. Same thing with the nap. If you're napping throughout the day, it's probably going to be really challenging for you to fall asleep at the end of the night. Similar, dozing off is another one, and sleeping in on weekends. Now, sleeping in on weekends can be a challenging one for people too, because if they're like, I don't have anything going on, I might as well sleep in. There's no reason for me to get up. Or, a lot of cancer patients too, when they've maybe decided to stop going to work, or they're maybe taking time off to attend to their treatments or their therapies, your schedule changes a lot during that time. So it would make sense if you no longer have to get up at 6 a.m. to go to work or get up at 6:30, you slowly kind of start sleeping in a little bit more. So maybe you're sleeping into 7 or 8 or 9, or maybe even later, because if you don't have somewhere to be right away, it makes sense that you wanted to maybe stay in and sleep a bit more. But what you're doing as you're sleeping in on the weekend or sleeping in because you're no longer having that work schedule, you start kind of pushing that wakefulness time that you're awake a little bit lower. So you're not necessarily up for that 18 hours throughout the day anymore. You're maybe only up for 12, which means you haven't given your sleep drive or sleep pressure enough time to kind of build up. So even though you're waking up at the different time, you're still going to bed the same because you've always done that. You've always gone to bed at 10:30 or 11. But what you've done is you've extended your sleep window, but you're not really a 10-hour sleeper. You've always been a 6-hour sleeper. So you're spending more and more time in bed, even though you've only ever been able to sleep the 6 hours. So I know that can be confusing because I'm saying random numbers. So let's do the math on that one again for whether it be sleeping in on the weekends or sleeping in because you're no longer working or just changing your sleep routine that you've done for many years. So on the blue, this is what I figured out, like what my sleep drive needs to be based on how many hours I'm sleeping at night and what I want my wake up time to be. So like I said, this means my total wake time is 18 hours. Whereas here, I go to bed the same time because I always go to bed at 1 a.m. So of course I'm going to go to bed at 1 a.m. But this time it's Sunday morning. Maybe it's snowing outside. I don't have anywhere to be. I'm going to sleep until 11. This means I've only given myself 14 hours of wakefulness if I want to try to keep the same bedtime. Which ends up happening then is you're in bed, you're tossing and turning, you can't understand why you can't fall asleep, and you start to get that feeling of frustration because you're in bed and you want to be sleeping because you always go to bed at this time. And that can be really hard too because you're adjusting to a new schedule and you want to get more sleep. But if you haven't always been someone that sleeps for that amount of time, it can be really challenging to just start sleeping those extra few hours. So that's our first process of our sleep. So that's our sleep drive. Next, we have our circadian rhythm. So this is our body's built-in clock. And it kind of helps to regulate our sleep, our eating, our core body temperature, our cell regeneration, and our hormone production. So just like with the sleep drive, there's some things we can do to strengthen it and some things we can do to weaken it. So in terms of strengthening, it can be waking up and getting out of bed at a regular time. The strongest anchor for our sleep is actually having a consistent wake time. Regardless of what day of the week it is, having a consistent wake time could be a really good anchor for you to have a consistent sleep schedule. Now, the thing with that, though, is no matter what time you fall asleep, you have to wake up at the same time. So if you're struggling that night, or if it's a little bit more of a challenging night, still getting up at that 6 or 7 a.m., even as if you were to have a good night. So that consistent wake time will be the strongest anchor for you to have a full night's sleep. Another thing that you can do to help strengthen your internal clock is the timing and the amount of light exposure. So our body naturally produces melatonin, which is our body sleep hormone, and it produces in the absence of light. So to help aid in this process, we can help time our exposure to light accordingly. So in the morning, it's beneficial to be exposed to that bright natural light first thing in the morning to help kind of stop that production of melatonin. It's kind of telling our body like, hey, it's morning, it's time to stop producing melatonin. And then on the flip side, at night, we can dim the light and help with the production of melatonin to kind of facilitate sleep. So again, kind of cueing our body by dimming the lights, whether that be turning off the lights in your house and maybe just using a lamp, dimming the lights on the back of our devices as well, or on our TVs. That can really help to kind of cue our body that, okay, we're getting ready for sleep. And then lastly there, another one is like regular activities in terms of eating and exercise. So really our body likes routine to the best of its ability. So here's the two processes working together. You have our sleep drive, which is kind of pushing us down throughout the day, which is that adenosine and that feeling of tiredness, pushing down. And then you have on the other side, our circadian rhythm or our clock, kind of pushing up and alerting and giving alertness. And you can see that they kind of match up right before our sleep window. So this gray part is our sleep window. So this is our optimal time to, right here, where our two are the furthest apart. Okay. Now, our body has another system that can be helpful in times of fight or flight. So this is our arousal system, and it serves a purpose and a function. So in fight or flight, it's there in case of emergencies and we're ready to go. However, it can also be there when it's not really serving a purpose or a function and kind of hindering us. So I have this little cartoon here. So let's go over all the dumb things we said today. This could be a while. So you'll notice the clock. And then a couple of minutes later, or almost an hour later, now we're thinking about a fight that we had 6 months ago. And then our brain is still going. And it's telling us of how terrible tomorrow is going to be because we haven't slept all night, because we spent all night thinking and going through those things about our day. And this can be, one of the main factors that contribute to the long-term effect or the long-term sleep difficulties. So our arousal system can be that little voice in our head that is running through our to-do list, worrying about an appointment we have coming up, worrying about maybe an event we have to go to, or dreading the next day because we just spent up all night thinking about the things we have to do and thinking about wanting more sleep. And it kind of creates that cycle of thinking. So our arousal system is what really contributes to the maintenance of insomnia and the development of insomnia. So how do we define insomnia and what is it? So insomnia is like the severity of insomnia symptoms can kind of range. So you can have the occasional night of sleep difficulties, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have an insomnia disorder. So there's clear kind of definition around it, which we'll go into, but it is quite common for us to have a poor night of sleep every now and then. Where it starts to move into maybe insomnia disorders, it's where the dissatisfaction with sleep quality or quantity is characterized by the following. So it's taking longer for you to fall asleep. So initiating sleep takes longer than 30 minutes. Maintaining sleep is greater than 30 minutes, and having early morning awakenings. So it also has to occur 3 nights per week, despite adequate opportunity for at least 3 months. And it is often accompanied by distress and impairments in daytime functioning, such as irritability or fatigue. So where insomnia symptoms may occur is if it's happening less than 3 times a week. So maybe it's only once a week and it was only for a month. Okay. So insomnia in cancer. So what's the prevalence rate? Well, it's between 30 to 50% of cancer patients report difficulties with insomnia, which does vary depending on cancer type of assessment and method, and also like type of treatment. So it is very high and there's a big range, especially when you look at the general population, that's only 10 to 15%. Okay, so that's 10 to 15% in the general population versus a 30 to almost 50% of cancer patients reporting difficulties with insomnia. So that's a big discrepancy, and there's a couple of factors that play into that. So there's an increased prevalence often in the cancer population of anxiety and depression. Chemotherapy also is associated with disruptions in our circadian rhythm, which is that body's internal clock. And medications is a big one too, especially steroids. So this can, steroids can disrupt our sleep, and there's some other medications too that, depending on the timing of day that you're taking them, can really impact our sleep. Hormonal treatments can also cause or worsen nocturnal hot flashes in both women and men. And other factors such as pain, discomfort, and overall fatigue can influence insomnia as well. So I have a couple of studies that we can go over here. Okay. So again, insomnia across the cancer trajectory. So around in this current study, it was around 1,000 patients. So again, 59 had insomnia symptoms. So not necessarily meeting diagnostic criteria, but experiencing insomnia symptoms. And 28% with insomnia disorder. Okay. So they followed these patients from the moment they were diagnosed up until 18 months, so in a longitudinal study. And even after the 18th month, 36% of the sample still had insomnia symptoms, and 21% still met criteria for insomnia disorder. So that's a rate, again, almost double the general population, which can be really challenging because sometimes sleep can be overlooked. Well, one in the general population, but especially within the cancer population. So why does it matter for people with, why does insomnia matter? Well, first off, that's a really big number of people that are having difficulties with sleep each night or feeling like they're not getting or restoring sleep. And there's also some relation to insomnia and depression. So insomnia and depression have a bidirectional association. So what that means is that both depression can influence insomnia and insomnia can influence depression. So the rate of depression in individuals with a cancer diagnosis is 3 to 5 times greater than the general public and the general population. And this study or this meta-analysis also found that a cancer diagnosis precipitated a major depressive episode, meaning that the cancer diagnosis came first. Now, this study also looked, which gets into that too, is that noticed a positive relationship between insomnia and subsequent depression out of 26 out of the 34 studies. Again, meaning that the insomnia came first and then the depression came after. Okay. And participants with insomnia compared to those without experienced more than 2 times greater risk to develop depression. So there's a really high correlation between insomnia and depression, and that relationship kind of goes back between each other and can create a little bit of a cycle. There's also a relationship between insomnia and cancer-related fatigue. Okay, so cancer-related fatigue can be defined as distressing, persistent, subjective sense of physical, emotional, and/or cognitive tiredness or exhaustion related to cancer or cancer treatment that is not proportional to recent activity and interferes with usual functioning. So in this meta-analysis, I looked at 84 studies, and there's an overall prevalence of 52% of cancer-related fatigue. So what they did is they looked at potential risk factors that may contribute or lead to cancer-related fatigue. So I have a few that I've highlighted here. So the first one being insomnia. So if you look at this down here, you can see that a risk factor of insomnia is 2.8 times more likely to develop cancer-related fatigue. Okay. And another one here is depression. So people with depression were 2.2 times more likely to develop cancer-related fatigue. Okay. And I point out these two because these are two that we can maybe try to manage to the best of our abilities. Because if you look at some of the other ones, such as pain, being female, or receiving chemoradiotherapy, those are things we don't have that much control over sometimes. Now, easier said than done. If we could easily control insomnia and depression, then we would do so. But there's definitely tools that we can do to help manage it, right? So that's why we are looking in on those, because there's a really high, again, possibility of insomnia at 2.8 times of developing cancer-related fatigue. So again, why does insomnia matter with people with cancer? Well, there's a lot of consequences that comes with poor sleep or insomnia for both our physical and our mental health. So by helping alleviate some of our sleep complaints, we could potentially improve the overall quality of life, especially with things for low mood, the fatigue, and even there's some relationship with pain too. So improving sleep can sometimes help with pain. But what do we do? How do we help with the insomnia, those nights where we're staring at the clock and we see that we haven't slept at all? Well, the American College of Physicians kind of came out with some recommendations on how to treat insomnia. Okay, so the first one, and I'll read it out here, is that all adult patients should receive cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia as initial treatment for chronic insomnia disorder. So that's the first recommendation. So CBTI is the first line of defense for insomnia. And recommendation 2, clinicians should use a shared decision-making approach, including a discussion of the benefits, harm, and cost of short-term use of medication to decide whether to add pharmacological therapy in adults with chronic insomnia disorder whom cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia alone was unsuccessful. So the first recommendation is CBTI, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. Then the second would be the pharmacological therapy. So the medications can be really helpful. And, some people see more benefits from that than CBTI, even though CBTI is the first line of defense and can be effective for majority of people. There's still a small percentage that would benefit from the sleep medication. But again, you can see it's the weak recommendation, whereas the CBTI has that stronger recommendation and a little bit more evidence to support as well. So what does CBTI, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, look at? Well, it looks at our behaviors. So this little cartoon here, so I spent all day hunched over my desk, railing coffee, staring at a glowing screen, and reading the news. And for some reason, when the sun sets, I can't seamlessly transition into calming down enough to fall unconscious. So similar, you spend all day doing things or all day kind of go, go, go. And of course, you're not going to be able to sleep. You just spent all day maybe watching TV or staring at screens or that endless caffeine. The other thing that goes back to that arousal system is our thoughts and our thinkings. So laying in bed, thinking a lot, thinking about sleep, kind of planning our day around when am I gonna sleep? Am I gonna sleep enough? Or I can't go there because I don't know if I'll sleep tonight. So, saying no to things that we might even enjoy because we're worried that we won't be able to sleep, wherever that may be. So CBTI, or cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, really tries to target these behaviors that we do around our sleep, or that we have set up around our sleep and our thinking patterns, whether that be around sleep or just that we notice our brain is going at night, regardless if it's positive or negative things. Okay. So this is our 3P model that we call in terms of the development of insomnia. So if we look at this insomnia threshold, this is kind of where we would go into like, okay, now we're showing symptoms of insomnia. So we have first our predisposing factors. So these are things that we're kind of born with and we can't necessarily change, and you can see that they're consistent throughout time. So one of this is being female, maybe being a naturally anxious person. These are what we consider like predisposing factors. So you can see they don't bring us anywhere close to the threshold. So just being female doesn't mean that we're going to develop insomnia. Then we have our precipitating factors. So 3 out of 4 people with insomnia are able to identify a single event or multiple events. So these are usually identified by a certain stressor. So a lot of folks will say that, the cancer, receiving their diagnosis, this was a precipitating event. So you have that immediate moment of kind of poor sleep right afterwards. And kind of pushes you over the insomnia threshold. Now, the event itself doesn't maintain the insomnia. You can see it tapers off as we go. Now I used, receiving a cancer diagnosis. It could also be treatment. It could also be being hospitalized for a while. It could be grief or loss. And it can also be some positive things too, like a birth of a kid or getting a new job. So whatever event just kind of sets us off is our precipitating. Then we have our third one, which is our perpetuating factors. So these are often things or strategies that we do to maybe help combat our sleep difficulties. So they may work in the short term. However, long term, they can contribute to the maintenance of insomnia. So these are things like spending more time in bed. So I had a poor night of sleep last night, so I'm just going to lay in bed and have a slow morning, or trying harder to sleep. So if I lay here for another hour, and if I just stay really still and close my eye, I'll be able to fall asleep. This could also be delaying your sleep time or your wake up time. So again, that sleeping in and pushing it back. This could be taking naps. So they can help in the short term of like maybe feeling like we're getting more sleep, but they can contribute to that maintenance of insomnia over time. And lastly, we have our conditioned arousal. So again, these are the like laying in bed, worrying about sleep, or laying in bed, doing a lot of thinking. What we end up doing with that is we're really pairing our bed with the association of wakefulness. So here's another little cartoon. So some people, I don't know if everyone's like this, they may have their favorite chair that they have. And every time they go sit in their chair, they have their favorite snack, whether that be popcorn, chips, fruit, just something that they always do. They sit in their chair at the end of the day and they have their favorite snack. So when you go sit in that chair sometimes and you don't have a snack, you start kind of craving it. And you're like, oh, I wonder, maybe I'll just go grab a snack. And for no reason, maybe you're not even hungry, but you just kind of associated that chair with having your favorite snack. Or walking into the kitchen, every time you go into the kitchen, you naturally kind of open the cupboard doors and see what's inside, because every time you're in the kitchen, that's what you do. Same thing with your bed. So if you get really used to kind of laying in bed, feeling frustrated, thinking, tossing and turning, what ends up happening is you've now kind of paired your bed with that wakefulness. When what we really want to do is pair your bed with sleepiness. So it's about building that relationship with your bed and sleep. So just like in this cartoon, you sit in your favorite chair, you want your favorite snack. When you go to bed, if you're used to kind of laying in bed, being awake, that happens. Even though you're feeling really tired and ready for sleep, you lay in bed and instantly that brain starts getting a little bit louder. So just another kind of cartoon. So this is the most tired I've ever been in my life. Well, I understand, I really do, but I'm anxious, and that really needs to be where your focus is right now. So the brain is kind of taking over, and that's that conditioned arousal piece. So as I mentioned, I have a couple of like sleep recommendations or like sleep rules that you can try implementing on your own. Which again, sometimes they're easier said than done, but like with any skill or building any form of habit, they can take a little bit of time and effort to get going on them. So the first thing that we kind of said, and I know we talked about this already, is that waking up at the same time, regardless of how well that night before went, which can be really hard. But what that's going to do is that's going to build up that sleep drive and that sleep pressure for that next night. So it's kind of getting into those ways of thinking of like, okay, so tonight was hard, but that's okay. I know my body knows how to sleep, and tomorrow will be even better because my sleep drive is going to be driving me straight to sleep. The sleep drive will be so high, I will be able to sleep this next night. So that's kind of one of them, that consistent wake up time. And also ensuring that morning light exposure. So that goes back to that internal clock of ours. So as soon as we wake up, kind of getting out into the sun to the best of our abilities. Now, I know that can be hard to do a morning walk as we get into like the winter months here. So finding ways that works for you, whether that's standing on your porch or getting close to the window and just getting yourself exposed to that bright light as soon as you wake up. Another better sleep rule is what we call a designated like clear your head time, or some people like to call it our worry time. So I kind of mentioned a lot or talked a lot about that voice that gets really loud sometimes when we go to bed. So what can be helpful is scheduling a time in the evening, maybe that's, or earlier on in the day, anytime that works. So it could be at lunch, or it could be before dinner, after dinner, and you're going to give yourself 30 to 45 minutes to kind of worry about all those things that are on top of mind for you. So you'll kind of block off that time. You can either, write it down in a little journal, all the things that are kind of keeping you thinking. Or it could be, maybe talking out loud or to someone else. You're giving yourself the 30 to 45 minutes to problem solve. And what that does is kind of leave it outside of the room. So you've designated your time to it. And the hope is that when you go to bed, you've already designated all that time and effort there, that hopefully it won't come with you to bed. And if it does come up when you're in bed, kind of telling yourself like, no, I gave you those 30 and 45 minutes before, and that was your time. And kind of reminding yourself like, I've already given myself 30 minutes to worry about this or to plan, and this is it for the night. Again, I know it can be easier said than done, but something to kind of start getting into the habit of. Another rule too, or tip, I guess, can be establishing what we call a buffer zone. So we recommend giving yourself 90 minutes before your bedtime to kind of do something for yourself that's pleasurable and relaxing. So these last 90 minutes can be used for light reading, can even be for watching a TV show, maybe listening to a podcast, having a bath. Trying to think of other activities. If you're into knitting, that could be another one. The most important thing when you're selecting these activities is you probably don't want to choose anything that's overly engaging. So if you're someone that picks up like a really good book and you need to finish it, like you can't put it down, think about a different style of book that you could reach for that isn't going to want to keep you engaged. Same thing with a movie or a TV show. Like it has to be something that you're okay to kind of turn off and put away once you're done those 90 minutes. Again, there's a little comment for like no backlit devices. TV is okay. Again, you want to have like dim lighting as much as possible. One more thing I'll say about these activities too is these are meant for things that you're doing outside of the bedroom, so outside of the bed. So you're giving yourself that 90 minutes somewhere else in your home. Okay. And don't spend time trying to sleep. So if you're putting a lot of effort into sleeping and you're kind of lying there for more than 30 minutes, getting yourself up out of bed. Now, for anyone who may be, experiencing a lot of pain and getting up at night isn't, as easy or as comfortable for you. Another thing that can be done is sitting up in bed. So what we want to do if we can't get ourselves out of bed, we'll just sit up in bed and sit until we're ready to, go back asleep. So then we'll crawl back down and lie down. And if we're not sleeping within 30 minutes, then kind of sitting back up. So if you're in a lot of pain, that's another like modification that you can make too, if that's better suited for you. And if you want to kind of get up and move to a different chair in your bedroom, that's an option, or it could be moving back to where you were having that buffer zone. So if that's somewhere else in your house that's comfortable, you can do that as well. Okay. Another one is creating a better sleep environment. So making sure you have as dark rooms as possible, no lights kind of bothering you. We recommend like removing any like TVs or clock from the bedroom as well. You really want to, again, strengthen your place of sleep to be for sleep. So all things kind of happen outside of the bed except for sleep and sex. Everything else goes elsewhere. There's lots of different things or tools to help with potentially like hot flashes. So there's sometimes people find fans to be helpful. There's like cooling pillows and cooling sheets, cooling eye masks. So there's a lot of different things to try. So all of those kind of make up your sleep environment. And lastly, again, easier said than done. Try not to stress too much about a poor night of sleep and really trying to remind yourself that a poor night of sleep means you're going to sleep better the next night because of that sleep drive. Because our bodies know how to sleep. They've been designed to sleep. But it's where we start thinking about it a little bit too much that we start, maybe not trusting our body's ability to sleep as much. So we have a couple of resources, and I'll just leave this one up for a little bit if anyone wants to write it down. So these are some books that you could read for yourself. I believe both of them are on Amazon. And for anyone that uses Libby, that's like associated with the library, I think both of them can be found there as well. So I'll just leave that up for a second, and I can come back to this slide afterwards too. Because the last thing I wanted to mention is actually a research study that you all could maybe be eligible for. So as Nikki mentioned, part of my research for my schooling is to do a project. So I've been working with Dr. Garland in her I Can Sleep app study. So it's the CBTI protocol that we talked about. So the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia kind of mushed into an app form. So through the study, you'd get access to an app and it would kind of move you through the CBTI protocol. So this is just like a little overview as to what it looks like. So if you are interested in finding out more, there's the email address that you can contact, or I can always, circulate something to Nikki who can send something afterwards, whatever is easiest for everyone. But yeah, we're in the early stages of developing the app, so we're really looking for that feedback in terms of things you like and things you don't like about it, with the hope to kind of launch a big Canada-wide randomized control trial in the new year. So yeah, and that was kind of everything I had to say about sleep. I hope that, there's something about the tips and tricks at least that you can try implementing, even if it's just one tonight. Like anything, they're skills that take time to kind of build. So just try to remember that as you kind of adjust to maybe implementing some of these. And thank you all.